Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
Dylan Larkin's already been on this team for 10 years, and tonight he reached 700 games, which is absolutely insane for me. It just doesn't feel like that long ago. And as you get older, you start to lose concept of time, and it just doesn't feel like 700 games with Dylan Larkin. And it was absolutely awesome tonight to see the Wings rebound after a tough road stretch with Larkin coming out like he was on fire and just had a huge game tonight. He was buzzing. And I don't know if I'm sad that it's already been this long with Dylan Larkin, but man, it doesn't feel that old. He just doesn't feel that old to me, but I don't know. It was a great game tonight. And with that, we welcome you to episode 20 of the Flying Octopus Podcast. My name is Evan Sabrin. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Tony Wolak and Devin Little. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind you where you can find us. Check us out on YouTube at The Flying Octopod. You can find us on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Threads under the same name. And don't forget to listen on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Guys, road trip was rough. 3 out of a possible 8 points. Highlight was a 5-2 win over the Panthers last Thursday when we last talked to you, but that was followed up by a 5-1 loss to Tampa on Saturday and a 4-1 loss to the Stars on Sunday. Then came a trip to the House of Horrors for the Red Wings in Philadelphia. Felt it was a pretty evenly played game, but the Wings fell in overtime as Rasmus Ristolainen scored an OT for a 2-1 win. Red Wings haven't won there, had one win there since 1997, which to me is absolutely makes me dumbfounded that they can go that long. I don't know what it is about Philly, but every time I see that they're playing, and if I was a betting man, I would throw the house down on the Flyers. Big bounce back game tonight. Dylan Larkin's 700th game, and man, he came out buzzing, on fire. Wings probably played one of their best games of the season. Really just took it to Montreal most of the night. Season high on shots, 45-29. Last time the Red Wings even had over 40 shots this season was, well, last time they played the Canadiens. Guys, what did you see out of tonight's game? It was looked like a complete game for the team, and it was good to see. Team's now 9-4-1 under Todd McClellan. Tony, I'll start with you.
You hit the nail on the head. It was a complete win, and it was encouraging to see because, like, the road trip was, you're right, it was rough. It was unfortunate that the Red Wings, couldn't steal a win from Tampa or Dallas and couldn't come out ahead in overtime against the Flyers. But, it was a nice statement win. You're back home. You're back from a long road trip, and you come out flying. And it was a dominant win, like top to bottom. So, like, overall, it's good looking forward. There's a tough stretch coming up. The Red Wings have Tampa Bay on Saturday, the Los Angeles Kings on Monday before heading out for a Western Canada road trip. It's momentum. And what I kept coming back to, like, during the game was, and bear with me for a second here, it's kind of an analogy, but in terms of Detroit's talent, it kind of presents itself on a bell curve. Like, for the most part, you're going to be, like, towards the middle. This is the talent of the team. This is, like, what you see is what you get here. Some nights they are far to the right where they are just crushing it. We saw that against Seattle the last time the Red Wings played them, when they just absolutely dominated the first period and were by far the best team in the game. And then to the left is, well, when they come out flat. Against Tampa would be a good example, where they are clearly a team underperforming and not living up to expectations. So under Derek Lalonde, more often than not, they played to the left of the median point. And with Todd McClellan, they're playing more often than not to the right of the median point. And what we saw tonight was another game to the right of the median point. And that's what you want to see with a new coach. That's what you want to see with a team with this talent. I don't think that they are a lottery contender or a team on the outside looking in. I frankly do believe they have the talent to be a playoff team, even if it is a wild card team. So when they have nights like tonight where they absolutely dominate a team like the Canadiens, who frankly they're trailing in the standings for the wild card after getting off to such a slow start, it's really encouraging because it's who they are. They're playing to their potential. They're playing it's the real hockey that we expect from them. Um, and so like I would hope that this is the start of another streak or another stretch where they're outperforming their expectations or at least performing better than what their average talent is. So I don't know. It's one win, but at least to me, it's an encouraging start.
Yeah, I'd say so. A big thing that stood out for me is just some individuals, really. Like you mentioned, Larkin playing in his 700th game. Of course, you're going to be fired up for that, making big plays, and uh, really stood out to me before the game. They asked Lucas Raymond to speak on it. He mentioned that Larkin's the heart and soul of the team. You see that every time, especially when Larkin's missing from the lineup. Moving away from Larkin, of course, Raymond himself making that crazy play to kind of deceive the defense and open up to Brinket on the short side, and that's an elite play right there. That's the type of play that a superstar, quite frankly, makes. That's incredible stuff from Lucas Raymond. He really kind of announced himself on that level late last season when the Wings were pushing for a playoff spot, and he's just kind of continued into this season, and that's all you could really hope for is that the momentum would carry on. But it to me seems like he's taking it to another level. He's not just showing flashes of superstardom. He's doing it on a regular basis. He's as much as DeBrincat hit the hole and good shot. He made sure to make good on that opportunity. That's all Raymond. And then another goal scorer from this Montreal game was Jonathan Berggren. I think just in general, Berggren's actually been really solid. His stat line on the season really isn't that impressive. That was only his 8th goal on the season. He has 13 points to this point, and that doesn't really jump out at you. But I think that he's one of those players where you like the process more than the production right now. I think he does a lot of good things, and typically good things are happening with him on the ice. Tony, I know you made a comment on social media that with Patrick Kane out of the lineup, you would have liked to have seen Berggren in that on that second line, and I agree. I think he's done enough to kind of warrant a higher a bigger opportunity, and I would have loved to have seen what he did with it. Now that being said, obviously things went pretty well, so maybe things were the way they needed to be. But um, it, you talk about the team as a whole really responding to the new coach and playing a good brand of hockey, a dominant brand of hockey. And in order to do that, you have individuals playing up to and beyond uh, the levels that they've shown before, really. Uh, and I think that you're seeing key players like Larkin, Raymond, and a depth forward like Berggren kind of exemplifying that right now.
It's interesting because at least from my perspective, Berggren and Kane, they're kind of similar players in the sense that they're playmakers. They tend to play towards the boards a little bit, but I mean that's great. It's a great comparison for Berggren considering Kane's a future Hall of Famer. But that's why I was like, I don't know if I put Tarasenko on the same line as DeBrincat. I would try to spread out the talent throughout the lines and put in someone similar to Kane in Kane's role while he's out. But I mean, it worked out. Like Berggren had a great game, and so did the rest of the Red Wings. So sure, why not just keep rolling with it? But one player I was particularly impressed with was Elmer Soderblom, and he obviously everyone knows him for his size. He's a 6'8", guy. It's very apparent when he's on the ice because he towers over Mort Seider, and that's saying something. So, but what was, I guess, the most impressive for me was when it came down to the end of the game, and you're looking at the stats after the game, he absolutely dominated in terms of high danger chances for relative to the rest of the team, relative to what happened when what Montreal did when he was on the ice. 6 high danger chances for when Soderblom was on the ice versus just 1 against. Like, are we talking about an NHL player here? Because I'm after these last 2 games, I'm kind of feeling like he should stick around even after Kane's back healthy, and maybe it's someone else who comes out of the lineup. But Devin, you've seen much more of him than I have from his time in Grand Rapids. I don't know. Are you feeling the same way? Like, is he here to stay, or is he headed back to Grand Rapids? At some point here.
I think that even going back to a couple of years ago when we first got our first look at Soderblom in the NHL, it all comes back to consistency. And I think that's kind of just been the word that I've kind of clung to as I've watched Soderblom over the years. He does look really good right now. I think he's doing things that you want to see a player with his toolkit do. I think he's using his size to his advantage. I think that his skating has gotten a lot better and he's able to use it to kind of create momentum and make him even more of a daunting puck carrier. It's hard to knock him off just with his size. It's even harder to knock him off when he's in motion. And I think that he's going where you want him to go. He's going along the boards. He's going into the net. Like you said, he's creating quality chances. The big thing for me is, does he do it? Is he still doing it a week from now? Is he still doing it 2 weeks from now? He did that in the first few games he played a couple seasons ago when he made the team out of training camp. And then after a couple weeks, he started to turn invisible. And then before you knew it, he was in Grand Rapids because he was not consistent. It all comes back to that for me. If we're still talking about him looking like a force of nature a couple weeks from now, then they've got a player. They absolutely do. He has all the tools to be, like I said, a freak of nature, a type of player that maybe 1 or 2 other teams have anything close to. I don't think he's going to be, this big offensive player, but he's going to be a pain in the ass to play against if he continues to play like this. And that's a type of player that every team needs to have. It's just, you got to bring it on a night to night basis. And for that, to kind of branch off of that, what I've seen of him in Grand Rapids, that kind of just, it still has me in this spot of, let me continue to see it. Let me see it again. Let me see it again. Let me see it again. He actually has looked really good this season in the AHL. I think that this has kind of been a year where you see him putting it all together. Again, using his size to an advantage. It's kind of crazy that how unwilling at times he was in years prior to just be a big dude. But he leans on defenders. He's running into the corners like a bull in a china shop. When he does that, it's hard to contain him. It's just, you physically are unable to match that. And he's also a player that it seems like he kind of scores and produces in bunches. He's feeling good about it.
So, I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Exactly to your point with how he's played over the last, 5 games for Grand Rapids, absolute heater. And it makes complete sense why the Red Wings called him up.
Exactly. Catch him while the iron's hot. And I think that's probably, this is kind of his best chance to find that consistency. He's feeling as good as he's ever felt. Kind of capture it while it's there. And then when you see him not have that confidence, he is the type of player that you see, maybe he gets a good chance and he misses it, or there's a good save or whatever. You definitely see him kind of shaking his head as he's skating to the boards or skating back to the bench. I don't know this for a fact, but just kind of with his body language, I feel like he is a player that is maybe a little hard on himself. Probably expects a lot more from himself, but these are professional athletes, and this is a player that has played in the NHL before. So maybe you kind of do have that expectation. You want to be back to that level. If he, I guess to kind of reiterate the point here, if he's at this level on a consistent basis, this is an NHL player. You do not send this player back to the AHL. It's just a matter of him proving that this is who he is and not who he is other days.
Yeah, I mean, to me, he's still an intriguing prospect. My other concern is I hope this isn't a showcase for a trade, as the There's been a lot of rumors the past month, and I don't know if Soderblom's one of those guys that could be moved that would intrigue somebody because of his size. But you're right, like he's totally looks like a different player to me than last time he was up because just of the way he's starting to figure out how to use his body. And another thing I love seeing tonight was when I believe it was the third period when Raymond just got leveled from behind by Matheson, and Soderblom was the first one right up there in his face. And then, Dylan Larkin's going up there with him and saying, "Calm down, big boy. Calm down."
Easy, buddy. Easy. I laughed out loud when I saw that. No,
and also, did you see the picture they had of Soderblom standing next to Ken Daniels? That was, I mean, people don't realize how freaking big this guy is, man. And it's hard for players that size. I mean, they're unicorns for players that size to be able to skate and have skill. Now, his skating's probably not up to NHL standards, but you can't teach size. And if he can get to the point where he can learn, be consistently able to defend off defenders while protecting the puck, I think he could be an effective player for this team down the stretch. I also think, he's so tall, just, give him the Holmstrom, man. Have him sit in front of the net. That guy's he's a beast. Who you can't see around him. You can't look over him. You're going to have to look side to side if you're a goalie. And hey, you don't got to worry about hitting him the puck in the face unless you're shooting it into the stands. So I like watching him. I'm intrigued by him. I'm just not 100% sold. Only played 803 tonight. I'd like to see him get a little more. I'd like to see him on a third line role. I think buried down on that fourth line role is I just like to see a little more of him. But maybe that's me just being selfish. How do you guys feel about that?
I don't have any objection to him being on the fourth line. Like if he turns into a fourth line player, like I'm good with that. Like frankly, his size can be a bit of a novelty, and that's fine. Like he's generating chances, he's limiting chances against, and you know what? For someone who was drafted in the 6th round, that's fine. Like the Red Wings have such a deep prospect pool that if he ends up on the fourth line for the next few years, 3-4 years, like great. I'm sure some like 1 year he'll hit like 10 goals, and like another year he might, get up to 15. Who knows what the future holds, but like if he's a fourth line guy because of the depth the Red Wings have, that's great. And frankly, they have a lot of depth too, because if you look at what Grand Rapids has, there's a lot of talent coming, like with like Nate Danielson and Amadeus Lombardi and Carter Mazur, who, hey, he's back in the lineup. That was great to see. And that's just offense. Like if you look at the defense, you got Wallinder, you got Shai Buyam, even Antti Tuomisto could be a player for the Red Wings in a couple of years here. So yeah, again, if Soderblom ends up being a fourth line player for the Red Wings, great. I'm happy. Like that means that there's a deep team in front of them. But I think now is a good time to kind of pivot to, the Detroit's prospects, the Griffins. Devin, I know you've been at a bunch of these games, watching these players. You've been working on your midseason prospect rankings for the Red Wings for a little bit now. I know, like, I guess we'll start with Nate Danielson because he is the top prospect on the Griffins currently. But I know I've seen a lot of commentary about his points not being as high as people would like, but I'm not overly concerned about that. Like it's his first year as a pro, and it takes time to kind of get used to the pro lifestyle. It takes time to get used to that pace of play. Like you're not concerned, are you?
No, not at all. And in fact, he's outproducing Marco Kasper to this point, compared to where Marco Kasper was last season. A few other factors to consider in that statement, but wasn't super concerned about Kasper. And the big thing about him last season was that he really turned it on the second half and started to look like an NHL player down the stretch. And I think that low-key Nate Danielson's kind of doing the exact same thing. Big thing from Danielson also is that he wasn't drafted to be this big point-producing top centerman, whatever. The big story about him coming out of his when they drafted him was that Connor Bedard said that he was the hardest player to play against. And that's the type of player that they drafted Nate Danielson to be. Obviously, you want him to be a potent offensive player in the NHL, get 60, 70, maybe even 80 points. But you drafted him to be like the ultimate matchup centerman, basically. So that's what you want to see him be. You want to see him continue to be a really hard to play against centerman. Now, has he looked like that? That's probably the real question here. He is becoming it. He's not there yet, but he's on his way. I think that a big thing for Nate Danielson over the next couple of years is going to be adding weight to his frame. Even after a full summer of training last year, he still looks like a kid out there. And there's only so much beef a 19, 20-year-old kid can have. And as he starts to mature, he'll definitely fill out. But for the time being, there are definitely times where he can get knocked off the puck because there's a full-grown man chasing him down. But he still plays with tenacity. He still plays like a man. He still plays the type of game where you see 5 years from now he could be that matchup guy. So no, to answer your question, Tony, I'm not concerned about him. And I think he's right on track to where the Red Wings want him to be.
So what about Carter Mazur? Because he's been out of the lineup for some time, and at least for me, I was high on him coming into the season. I initially wanted him to make the Red Wings out of training camp, and be sort of on like a high energy fourth line for the Red Wings, with Berggren and Casper, and obviously that didn't happen. Things kind of changed, but what are you hoping to see down the stretch from Mazur now that he's healthy? Now that he's back in the lineup and on the top line with Danielson.
High key, I still think he can push for a roster spot down the stretch. The same way that Simon Edvinsson kind of joined the team after the trade deadline last year and helped with the playoff push. I think Carter Mazur could play that same type of role. What I want to see is pretty much more of the same, and the same way that you're seeing Raymond kind of play at a higher level this season. You want to see Mazur play at a higher level this season in the AHL. You want to see him more often than not. When you watch him play, you want to say that's an NHL player, because just like you, Tony, I thought he had a really good shot to push for an NHL spot at a training camp, and obviously it just wasn't meant to be. But I don't think he's might take a couple of games to get up to game speed. It usually happens, knock the rust off. But then once he's back up to speed, I think he's going to be right back to that category of, all right, when is he going to get the call up? When's he going to get the call up? He's a scrappy forward. I've always kind of called him Tyler Bertuzzi 2.0, just because he kind of plays that type of game, and has the skill to back up the snarl. I think he's the ultimate complementary winger too. He'll go to the corners, go to the rough areas, dig the pucks out, make the non-glamorous plays. If you see him continue to do that, and he's producing at a high level like he has shown he can, he's going to get a call up at some point here. It's just kind of a matter of when.
What are you seeing on the defensive side as far as the prospects in Grand Rapids?
I am seeing that I am very excited for Axel Sandin-Pellikka if he ends up in Grand Rapids. But in all seriousness, so there's obviously a few notable prospects on the blue line. William Wallinder, Antetokounmpo Misto immediately come to mind. There's a lot of other guys that it's honestly a pretty veteran-clad blue line. And then you have guys like Emil Viro that don't play every day, but they're kind of in and out. Shai Bloom, I can't forget him. He plays more often than not. I'll say this: when the Wings, what was that, a month ago, called up William Wallinder because they basically had to. They were out of bodies. I was a little nervous. I don't know that any of their prospects in the AHL are ready to go. They're not exactly knocking on the door like Danielson or Mazur, but they're still making progress. I think the one, I guess we'll talk about Wallinder because he was the one who got called up. So theoretically, he's right there on the depth chart. When I watch him play, he doesn't stand out. And in some ways, that's good. He's not making bad mistakes. You typically like when a defenseman, you don't notice a defenseman, right? but then he's also not making, these big plays that make you go, wow, he doesn't disrupt the flow of play. And by that, I mean, he doesn't speed things up. He doesn't slow things down. He doesn't, he kind of continues with things. He facilitates. There's some promise there, and you see the tools. You see why Detroit like them and why they're where they are, but they're not ready quite yet. And I joked at the beginning and said I'm ready to see Axel St. Pellica, but there is some truth to it. None of them have that. I'm ready to play in the NHL factor like Axel St. Pellica does already, even though he's not even in North America yet.
It makes you wonder, though, like we've talked in the past about like a potential Dylan Cousins trade, and seeing that on some nights Detroit's defense is frankly not great. Their blue line is quite leaky, and if the Red Wings want to make a change, they do have a deep prospect pool, so it does make you wonder, like someone like a William Wallinder, Shai Buyam, Antetokounmpo, before they peak, should they be trade chips? And like, I know that's kind of could be a difficult concept because like you get attached to these prospects, and whether it's like a Wallinder or Amadeus Lombardi or Emmett Finney, it's like you see this player that kind of develops over time and exceeds your expectations at certain points, but there's only 23 roster spots, only 20 players dress a night. So like at some point you have to decide, is this player going to be a key contributor on the team, or can we consider them as a trade chip to bring in a key contributor? So I'm wondering, like, kind of depending on how the season plays out, like, is Wallinder a contributor or is he a trade chip? Same with like Buyam, same with Tuomisto, same with Lombardi. Because if you're not in the top six or the next best player in the bottom six, like frankly, you can find cheap talent on the free agent market to fill those bottom six, bottom pair roles. And you don't need to, not everyone on your team needs to be a drafted and developed player. Like look at the Florida Panthers. Like there are plenty of acquisitions on that team. There are free agent signings on that team. There are waiver claims on that team. Not everyone needs to be like homegrown. So it does make you wonder, but we'll see how the season plays out. Because I mean, it would be nice to see Wallinder get a game at the NHL level, especially if William Lagesson is just in Detroit and sitting on the bench, or not on the bench, in the stands. But anyway, sneak peek. We're going to be talking about the trade deadline next week, so stay tuned for that. But
I belong to Minnesota Wild for his brother, for Kaprizov. Let's do it right now. I'm in.
There you go.
There you go.
Get those brothers together. It could be like the Sedin twins on the back end, and Kaprizov comes here, and then everyone's happy.
There you go.
That will not be one of the topics on our trade deadline special. Did want to shift gears, guys, real quick here, as the Red Wings announced their quarter-century team, and of course, my dumbass couldn't read. And I looked at the tweet that Tony retweeted out, because the first team had Pavel Datsyuk, Steve Yzerman, Henrik Zetterberg. And my first thought was, well, how the hell is Fedorov not on there? And then I remembered that I really failed math pretty much in high school and in college, and remembered that Fedorov was only there for 3 years after the year 2000. So I did want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Again, I want to look at the first team here. I said Datsyuk, Yzerman, Zetterberg. The defensemen were Kronwall, Lindstrom, and Osgood. Second team is Fedorov, Larkin, and Shanahan. I do like that line. Chris Chelios, Rafalski, and Hasek. Curious your guys' thoughts. Did you guys agree with this? There's a couple where I would have shifted around, and I'm guessing you guys could figure out which one I would do. But Tony, I'll go with you first. What did you think about the first team?
I've been thinking about this quarter century team for a little bit with all the other teams being announced. And I guess the two roles or players that I kept going back and forth on was like the third forward after Datsyuk and Zetterberg, and then the goalie. At least for me, defense seems pretty straightforward. Lidstrom and Kronwall were like the premier top defenseman for the Red Wings from 2000 to 2025. Like, at some point, I feel like Seider could, put his name into that mix, but at this point, no, I don't think he's surpassed Cronwall.
Not the first team.
Not on the first team, but like, in recent memory, Cronwall was at the end of his career and not like just a shell of himself. But when he was in his prime, my God, that guy was a beast. So fully deserving to be on that first team there. Datsuk Zetterberg, again, that same time frame, 2000 2025. Elite players, not only on the Red Wings, but in the NHL. So no objections there. I was kind of surprised to see Yzerman on the first team, considering like he retired in 2006. He only played 4 seasons for the Red Wings. Well, 5 seasons, I guess, depending on when you start that. But
and that was the end of his career.
It was the end of his career. So yeah, I was kind of surprised. Like, and then I was like, well, maybe he still produced pretty well during that time, but in that same time frame, he was 23rd among Red Wings players in terms of production, like in terms of points. Like Anthony Mantha had one more point than him. It took him about 40, 45 more games to do that, but Anthony Mantha had one more point than him. Tyler Bertuzzi had more points than him, and so did Yuri Hodler, for that matter. So, like, it was a little surprising. I thought he'd be on the second team because of just the name brand recognition. I thought we'd see like Dylan Larkin or Thomas Holmstrom on that first team, but yeah, I mean, I guess no objections. He's a franchise icon, so can't really hate on that. As for goalie, I could have gone a bunch of ways. My preferred pick was Osgood. But the thing was, like, he was the starter for 4 years during that time span and the backup for 3. Hasek was the starter for 3 years, or co-starter for 3 years, and a backup for 1. Well, it wasn't exactly a backup, but like when he came out of retirement and Curtis Joseph was on the team, he was back, and then he got a groin injury and then just missed most of the season. So you can't really count that. But I mean, the only other goalie that comes to mind besides Manny Legacy, who's my personal favorite, but obviously I don't think he's the number one for that time frame, was Jimmy Howard, just due to longevity. And if I get some objection to this, like, I apologize, but frankly, he was a mad goalie for most of his career for the Red Wings. And like, if that offends anyone, I am truly sorry, but he had 3 good seasons in his 11 years for the Red Wings, 11 full years with the Red Wings. And apart from that, he was there, and he was signed to a good contract, and they didn't need to go out and find anyone else. But the Red Wings didn't do much in terms of a playoff depth with him, apart from one Western Conference at that time appearance. Like, he was a mid goalie. I'm sorry. Like, if that offends anyone, again, I'm just calling it how I see it.
Rest his soul is named after Jimmy Howard, is rolling over over the rainbow sky right now.
I'm sorry, buddy, but still, like,
I agree. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. I think Osgood and Hasek were the top goalies during that time frame, even if they didn't play as long as Howard did.
Devin's ready to put Kosa on there, right? No.
Give it another, I guess, at the half century team. I think Kosa will be on there, but that's down the road. The way I kind of thought about this is just players that define the quarter century. I don't think there's really another way to think about it. It's not necessarily the best players, but who defined the last 25 years. That's why I like how you described it, Tony. Nicholas Cronwall and Nicholas Lidstrom were definitely going to be the top defensemen, are the first team quarter century, because they defined the blue line for the first 25 years. And then Datsuk and Zetterberg, same idea. When you think about 2000s Red Wings, Those are probably the first two names that come to mind. And then that is the question. Who's that third player? And I do agree. I was a little surprised by Yzerman, but I still think that even though the last few years of his career were definitely not the highlights of his career, he still is the captain. And there's still that, like, even people that haven't really cared about the Red Wings in a while still know who Steve Yzerman is. And he's the general manager now. I know this is about players, but he's such a franchise icon, and he still did play for at least a few years that, like, all right, fine, I get it. I don't know that it's the best pick, but I can live with it. And then the second team, and then Ozzy, I do agree. I think Osgood was the right pick. I think that if you ask a fan that hasn't really been plugged in recently to name a Red Wings goalie, they probably name Osgood or Vernon, honestly. And Vernon was not in this century, so it's probably Osgood. And Osgood, for what it's worth, obviously, like you said, Tony, he was the Cup-winning goalie in 2008, led the team to another Stanley Cup final the following year. A lot of great Red Wings memories that people have to this day involve Chris Osgood. It just kind of makes sense that he's the goalie on the first team. And then second team, I think, is so honestly wide open with in a lot of different areas that it could have been a lot of different people. Like Sergei Fedorov is arguably the best player to ever wear the winged wheel. Arguably, I'm not going to say that is the case, but he's in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that he belongs here because, like you said, Evan, he only played a few years.
Yep.
Like there's some other guys I could make an argument for here. Thomas Holmstrom could be there. Chris Draper could be there.
Johan
Franzen could be there. Crazy enough, Justin Abdelkader could be there. Like, again, who defines the 25 years? I don't think Sergei Fedorov does. Same thing with Brendan Shanahan. I don't know that he defines the first 25 years. I think he definitely is a key figure of the late 90s, but it's not what we're talking about. And then Dylan Larkin, that makes a ton of sense. He's the current captain, longest tenured member of the team. If there's any representative from today's team, it's got to be Larkin. It just makes sense. He just hit his 700th game today, right? And then the blue line, I actually do think there's so many different people you could have considered. I do think you could have made an argument for Seider here. Absolutely. He won the franchise's first Calder Trophy in the expansion era. That means something. And let's also not pretend that Chris Chelios was prime. Chris Chelios was here while he was in Detroit.
He was in his 40s.
He was in his 40s. Great player, don't get me wrong, and played a key role in some of those cup-winning teams, but I don't know. I think I'm going to take the Calder winner over 40-year-old Chris Chelios. Do respect Brian Rafalski being there. I think he's probably the most underrated defenseman that the Red Wings have had, especially in the last 25 years. And then Dominik Hasek's Dominik Hasek. If you had Dominik Hasek and you are the team that he won the elusive Stanley Cup with, you include him on this list. I think that there is a strong argument to be made for Jimmy Howard. I do agree with your assessment, Tony. He's average, but again, defines the last 25 years. Jimmy Howard's the last stable goaltender this team has had.
I mean, that same argument, you can also make the case for Justin Abdelkader, Darren Helm, Jonathan Erickson, those types of players in terms of longevity and also having a meaningful role on the team.
Forgot Dan Cleary.
Dan Cleary.
Danny DeKeyser, for that matter. But they're not the picks for this for a reason. And that's why I was against Jimmy Howard being on the first or second team. I know this is just being done for engagement, and this is exactly why we're talking about it. But yeah, just that the same logic of including Jimmy Howard, it's the exact same logic for possibly including Erickson, DeKeyser, Cleary, Helm, Cronwall. Not Cronwall, Abdelkader. But I don't know. I think generally speaking, they got it right. I do agree on the thing about, Fedorov and Shanahan not being there for much of that quarter century. I would have much preferred to see Thomas Holmstrom replace one of them. It seems ridiculous to say that out loud, considering the overall impact of their careers. But again, if we're talking about 2000 to 2025, like Holmstrom did play in significantly more games for the Red Wings than Fedorov, and he produced significantly more points. And he won 2 Stanley Cups, not just one. So Holmstrom over Fedorov for this one instance.
I think Fedorov's the sexier name. And a side note, Devin, Tony texted me his pick for goalie was Magnus Hellberg. That's who he wanted to be on the second team.
Definitely the best setups of the last 25 years, for sure.
I was just coming up with random goalie names at this point.
Mark Lamoth or Joey McDonald or
there you go.
Someone.
No, who are we forgetting the first round pick? Thomas
McCollum.
Yeah, it's Thomas McCollum. I think he's still playing overseas now.
Dudes dropping player names. Like, we could do this all day.
Absolutely. I do have a quick question for the group. Let's create 2 more slots. Who are your first team and second team coaches of the 25 years? And the thing is that there's really only 3 candidates. There's 4 actually. I kind of forgot about Dave Lewis. Sorry. But like, it's Scotty Bowman, Mike Babcock, or Jeff Blashill if you want to make the longevity argument, but I don't think it's Jeff Blashill.
God, with this recent win streak, we could even go Todd McClellan.
Right?
All right, guys, we're running out of time here, and I got to get to work. So, again, thanks for joining me tonight, guys. Really good win tonight, man. That was a fun game to watch. And like I said, 700 games for Dylan Larkin, it hasn't sunk into me yet. Time goes by fast, especially in the NHL when these guys, their careers are a lot longer than, this guy's been on the team since he was 18, and now he's 28 years old and still killing it for us. And it was a fun game to watch tonight. I really, really enjoyed that. Tune in on Friday. We have an exciting little announcement that we're going to make on the Flying Octopod on our Twitter page. And it's something that we've been in the works for a little bit. And it's something that George Malick's going to be heavily involved in. So check that out tomorrow on our Twitter page at Flying Octopod. I just wanted to remind everyone one more time where you can find us. Check us out on YouTube, Flying Octopod. You can also find us on Twitter, like I just mentioned, Blue Sky, and Threads under the same name. And don't forget to listen to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, real quickly, I do want to let everyone know that the Red Wings are 3-0 when I wear my Red Wings slippers that my daughter got me for Christmas. So I'll be continuing to wear these this week, even though my dog chewed half through most of them. But these are my new good luck slippers. I'm also concerned, Tony, did you start a TV or a T-shirt business without us there? You got an octopus there in the shirt. Like, do we miss something here?
No, it's funny. My wife bought me this shirt like 3 years ago, at least. And I think it's sick. It's just octopus with Detroit on it. She found it on Etsy somewhere. And like, I got home from work and walk in, and my toddler, like, he's like, "Hi, Dada," and he looks up at me and goes, "Octopus." And I'm like, yes, it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a great game against the Canadiens. And sure enough, they won. So yeah, maybe we need some merch here pretty soon, huh?
Yeah. I mean, we got a cool looking logo, dude. I think it would look good on a hat or a T-shirt in black. So that is something to look at.
You want some merch? We'll get some made, I guess.
Yeah, we'll get on that soon here. All right, guys. So Wings up hosting Tampa on Saturday, hosting the Kings on Monday, and then Edmonton on Thursday. We'll be with you on Thursday, but I don't know if we're going to be up late enough to finish that Oilers game. So some of us have bedtimes and jobs. So yeah. Thanks for joining us. Episode 20. I can't believe it's 20 episodes, guys. I'll be honest, I didn't think we'd make it to 5, but here we are. Thanks again for watching episode 20 of the Flying Octopus Podcast, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.